But now he almost feels like Mr. Liverpool in the way that a Gerrard did. You know, that it's like, you know, I can carry this club and they can carry me. Let's start with contracts. Let's start with Salah. Obviously, David Ornstein of The Athletic last night putting out a report that Liverpool have made an official offer. I think it was 2 weeks ago that you spoke to 2
weeks at Southampton.
In the mixer, and he said that he hadn't had an official offer at that point. One has now reportedly landed. I mean, it makes sense, but does it give you hope that Liverpool are finally getting things sorted out, or do you think it's the start of another long process?
Yeah, it's difficult to say, isn't it? Because it doesn't necessarily say when the offer was. It was similar to the update with Virgil van Dijk on Wednesday, was it? There was a similar story from David on that one. And yeah, I mean, people at Liverpool, people I speak to at Liverpool, sort of under sworn orders not to talk about contract situations, which is basically a blanket rule at Liverpool. Yeah. So difficult to sort of get any further information that way. And you know, Salah's camp, I guess you'd describe them as unavailable for comment. Still waiting to hear back from them, but I don't doubt that, you know, this is accurate from David Ornstein, who's you know, one of the absolute best around, isn't he? And it was an interesting update because it was only 2 weeks ago that Mo told us in the mix zone at Southampton that there'd been no official offer. Obviously, doesn't mean to say that the talks weren't ongoing or hadn't started or anything like that. You know, someone speaking to on the way back from Southampton after speaking to Salah, and they were adamant that talks were ongoing, and he was described as positive with Rami Abbas, and the hope was that a resolution could be reached. So maybe this is the start of that. You know, there's no suggestion either way at this stage that it's something that Salah has turned his nose up at, or, you know, how far away they are from an agreement. Mm-hmm. I guess it's fair to say that because there is no agreement, that does mean in turn that perhaps has turned it down. But you know, just the way Salah speaks and what we know, you know, he's absolutely desperate to stay at the club. So there's a willingness on both sides to find the resolution here. And I guess it's just the specifics around it, whether that's as bonus related, whether it's, you know, general per week wage, or whether it's the length of the contract, or maybe it's all three. There's a lot of talk that needs to happen for a deal of this scale. You know, the biggest one that Liverpool have ever handed out to Salah, to anyone at the club, actually, was 2 years ago, wasn't it? So by extension, this means that it's going to be the biggest one that they've ever dealt with as well. So yeah, progress, a step in the right direction, I'd say, for supporters who were waiting any sort of further updates, since Salah said 2 weeks ago that he was disappointed that no offer had been put across the desk of Rami Abbas.
Yeah, we've got, by the way, we're getting some good questions in on YouTube. So if you have asked a question, I will, I'm making notes of them, so I will get to them as we go on throughout the podcast. Yeah, I wonder whether, you know, obviously Salah had said a couple of weeks ago that Liverpool had made an official offer, and I think we discussed at that time that perhaps, I think people misconstrued that a little bit to mean that Liverpool hadn't really even opened talks when the talks were ongoing. It was just that, I think, the way I read the situation was surely that Liverpool would only make an official offer when they were more confident that would be considered, maybe not accepted, but certainly considered by Salah and his agent. So I wonder now if an offer has gone in, what sounds certainly like it has, that Liverpool are now more confident they're getting to a place, they're closing the gap and getting to a place where Salah is more likely to accept. So I do think it's encouraging. You know, I mean, you wrote a story, didn't you, 2-3 months ago that Salah was desperate to stay. Since then, we've seen him publicly act that out, you know, from saying it directly from his mouth and the way he's played and acted, social media. And we were talking, where we last night, you see all these different hints all over the weekend. And I think we're at this stage where people are just making up these great theories. So I saw
a couple of interesting ones.
Yeah, a guy tweeted yesterday, a friend, so I won't name it, but I thought it was funny. He said Liverpool were tweeting hat-tricks of Salah yesterday, and this would be his third contract with the club, so could it be...
No pin tweet as well.
Yeah, no pin tweet, yeah.
Also, as well, Salah on social media with the white smoke sort of billowing out from his coffee table, and, you know, there's some theory that white smoke is a kind of indicator across...
Pope, isn't it?
It's just that, you know, certain religions, that it means that an agreement has been made, and you know, it's sort of the turning of a corner. But I don't know how much, you know, Salah, the Egyptian, pays stuff like that. But yeah, it's just interesting when you see all these little things, and supporters, you know, they love a theory or two, don't they? And I just found it all interesting because usually a lot of it is sort of rooted in that is reaching quite far. But some of these last night that I was reading, you sort of think, oh, maybe there's something in that. But we await further progress, I guess.
And do you know what? I wouldn't put it past Salah. We saw the last time they obviously did the little thing with his agent, didn't he? Where his agent did the public tweet.
Yes. Yeah.
And they played that game with supporters. I mean, don't get me wrong. I do think it's quite a cruel game to play with what we have weeks now until he can talk to other clubs. And but I do find that I wouldn't be surprised if this is something that when they eventually, hopefully, they announce it, they have all these little things where Salah's done things recently and planted these seeds. So
maybe he meant to go on the record at Southampton.
Maybe.
It's an orchestrated sort of plan of action, isn't it, from Salah and Rami, from the social media post after the Brighton game? You know, whatever happens now. Yeah. And the celebration down the Anfield Road, then when he sort of sits on the barrier and I just, you know what that means to him. It feels like it's more than just a standard celebration to me. You know, little things like that. It's almost like, you know, I'm the main man. I want to stay here. What is up the sleeve of the club? But like we say, this update from David Ornstein last night is encouraging. It's a step in the right direction, but it wasn't necessarily you get the feeling sometimes that you know, deals are perhaps closer at certain points, and I didn't get the feeling that this one is, and haven't had that sort of relayed to me either way that it is close. So we'll await further updates. Slot will get asked about it, of course, today, won't he? And he'll play the straight bat, of course he will. But, you know, who else do you speak to about these things? On the record. So Slot will carry on getting asked about it. Yeah,
I do think Salah has morphed, hasn't he, in the way that he plays his football for Liverpool. Like you say, those moments where he's sitting on the barrier and stuff like that. You know, when he first arrived, and for the first good 5 or 6 years, I think he was at Liverpool, I felt like he was more like the cold-eyed marksman that, you know, could go and play for Real Madrid and could go and play for other clubs and still be a similar player. But now he almost feels like Mr. Liverpool in the way that a Gerrard did. You know, it's like, you know, I can carry this club and they can carry me. So it feels, it just feels more, especially I think as well since bigger personalities. I think we've talked about this in the pod before. Since big personalities have left the club, you know, whether it was Henderson and Milner a few years back, Mane, Firmino, that sort of era of players, and now Klopp, it feels like he's taken on more and more responsibility that he is one of the real leaders just all around the club now. And 100%, he represents them really well. So,
I mean, it's a long time at one club, isn't it? Yeah. You know, what is it? Is he into his 8th season now? 2017 he joined. So, yeah, you're right. Like this Liverpool feels like, you know, Klopp said it, didn't he? Liverpool 2.0. And it certainly felt like that at the beginning of last summer when they basically signed an entire new midfield. And you've still got the stalwarts, you know, your Van Dijks, Alissons, Robertson and Salah. And Salah has been the main man this season again. And yeah, you're right. It just feels now as though he's more talismanic than he's ever been, really.
Certainly agree with that. He's not slowing down. So, you know, I think there's been talk over how long would you give him. I just think if they gave him a 3-year, I mean, what's the worst that can happen? That after 2 years that they think, you know what, we need to evolve here and move Salah on. I still think in 2 years' time there'd be a queue of clubs, whether they be the Inter Miamis, the Saudi clubs, or whether the likes of Real Madrid, people like that would still hold an interest. I think if Liverpool wanted to move him on and he wanted to move on, there'd be a queue of clubs for him. You're never going to struggle there. Ronaldo never struggles to find a new club, neither does Messi. So I don't necessarily think Liverpool are going to be stuck. I think I said to a couple of, he's not Winston Bogart, is he? He's not going to sit in the reserves for 2 years and take the money. So I feel like if it's over length, you would think that they could get that done, couldn't you? That would suit all parties.
Yeah, he's not going to drop off a cliff overnight, is he? You know, maybe 2 or 3 years time, you're not getting the same output that you're getting today. But they're the risks you have to take. I think. I think at a certain point you have to stop being uber cautious in the way that Liverpool are ran. You know, maybe necessarily it's not their model, but it's the way they're sort of bound by the ownership. And it's interesting. I'd love to know how high up this contract situation goes at the club and beyond into the sort of ownership level. You know, FSG have this thing call it an ownership decision. I've heard Billy Hogan talk about it in the past. I've spoke to Peter Moore about it, and they describe it as an ownership decision. Now, normally a player's contract wouldn't go that far up the chain. It's the sporting director who would be looking after it. But does Salah, is he a special case because of the sums involved, because of the importance of him on the pitch, because of his profile outside of the club, all of these things? In a normal world, it'd be Richard Hughes sort of speaking to Rami, but does Michael Edwards get involved? I'm almost certain he does. Does John Henry get involved? What's the input from Tom Bernard? Does Mike Gordon even sort of still have an input on this sort of stuff? And he
got involved last time, didn't he? I know he's still officially at the club last time, but he did certainly get involved. Yeah, well, obviously that would be Michael Edwards' remit then, wouldn't it? But does he even go above him and the real sort of head honchos? How much of an input are they having? So all this is interesting and fascinating. But like we say, I suppose with David Ornstein's update last night, this is a good step in the right direction, if not quite the give him his dough, sign on the dotted line stuff that the supporters were hoping for. When it comes to risks, and I'd make the same arguments about Virgil van Dijk as well. Obviously, Alexander-Arnold is a different case entirely, but for those two, I think what's the bigger risk? You keep him, and in a couple of years' time, you're stuck in having to try and offload him, or you let them go and fall off a cliff next year because you have a Salah or Van Dijk shaped hole in your team. And I think you look at the statistics now, neither of them are. I mean, I would argue this is Van Dijk so far. The levels he's reaching is one of his best seasons, maybe certainly for the last 4 years. Yeah, for 4 years. So maybe he's reaching levels that he reached when they won the title the season before that, when he was brilliant. So, and Salah is reaching levels that he's never reached really at Liverpool, has he? Even in the 44 goal season. All right, he was a very different player, but I think he's further ahead now, isn't he? Am I right in saying that?
He might be. He's got 15 now.
I'm sure he's further ahead now, someone correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, than he was during that season. So it's not like the levels are going. And I think the biggest thing I think for Liverpool is if they let these players go, and all right, they might save a lot of money on wages, but you've got to replace them both next summer. And then you add that to all the other work you're doing in terms of you're bringing in a new goalkeeper potentially. We know that obviously they've signed one, but bedding him in. Potentially a new right back if Alexander-Arnold goes. Potentially a new left back because that's a position that we're talking about. Not just one centre back. Then you're probably looking at two.
Maybe midfielder. Number 9. That's conversation as well.
Yeah, number 9 comes. So you're looking at such a huge outlay next summer, and if you don't get them right, what sort of pressure does that put on Richard Hughes, who's not long into the club? What does it put onto a whole new recruitment team that Michael Edwards is sort of helping to bed in? So I know it goes much bigger and beyond that, and we're talking about huge figures, but I do think just in terms of football risk that I think it's much riskier to let them go than it is to keep them. Yeah, with the levels they're putting in.
Yeah, and ultimately at some point, your sporting endeavour has got to come ahead of the business side of things, doesn't it? Liverpool there's a chance here that he could win the league, and
they're not struggling business wise. It's not like you look at Liverpool and go, they've got to save money from somewhere.
PSR issues, they need to offload a big player or get someone off the wage bill. No, Liverpool have been run really well, haven't they, for a number of years? And we know that the reason these contracts are where they are is because of a myriad of reasons, haven't they? With going back to 2 years with the ownership of putting the club up for sale tentatively, if not sort of officially, and then the sporting director knock-on effect and all that sort of stuff, Klopp leaving. So there are big reasons why Liverpool are where they are with these contract situations, and it's sort of been unfairly dropped on the lap of Richard Hughes. But at some point you have to think that these key players mean more to the club than what they'd save on wages and trying to bring to the next sort of the new era, if you guess, because there's absolutely no guarantee that they're going to be as prolific as Salah or as important as Van Dijk defensively.